everyone. So this is the video I've been meaning to get up for a little while now. I've been really busy, unfortunately, with preparing for college, which I leave tomorrow morning, and just kind of busy with life in general, so sorry for the delay. But here it is. I just wanted to give you all an update on how my summer went, just kind of share with you what God's done in my life during the summer and recently, and just the different ways that he really blessed me and my team over this past summer. So thank you all for being patient, and thank you so much for watching. So this past summer, I went to Poland with the organization Teen Missions International. I led a team of 14 teenagers who were aged 14 to 19, and I led them with the help of 3 other leaders. We were originally supposed to run an ESL camp, or an English as a second language camp, for kids over in Poland, but those plans actually were changed briefly before we got to Teen Missions itself down at the base in Florida. So we thought we would be teaching English classes and teaching phonics, but God had much greater, much better plans for us, which we didn't actually find out till we got to Poland. All we knew was that we weren't doing our English camp. When we first got to Poland, the kids had a lot of small construction projects that they were able to work on. They worked on rebar, they worked on straightening and tying rebar, and they were able to do some cleaning around the church that we were staying at. And they also were able to paint some of the walls of the church and fix up the church a little bit. And we were also asked while we were there by the church to paint a mural on one of the walls, and we ended up painting the verse, "I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me ye can do nothing," John 15:5. And we were able to kind of bless the church in that way and be blessed by them, that they would actually ask us to do that, and they had us all sign it when we were done. So that was just kind of a little bit what the kids got to do over the summer. I wasn't really able to go out to the work projects much, except for the ones that we did have at our church where we were staying, because I was busy elsewhere doing the duties that I had for the summer. So that was just kind of an idea what the kids did. Here's kind of what I did. This summer was a lot different from my past experiences with Teen Missions. It was different in probably the best way possible. As a leader, I felt a whole lot more comfortable in my zone. I felt definitely like I was right where God wanted me to be, instead of being like, I'm not quite sure if I should be here. I knew for a fact that that was what God had for me, and I knew that as a leader, I was doing what he wanted me to do. And that's kind of funny, because before I left for the summer, I was kind of nervous. I was scared about how that would go, how handling all that responsibility would be. But as soon as I got there, like, everything that was worrying me just kind of slowly faded away almost overnight. And I mean, it was still scary at times, and it was still kind of crazy managing everything, but God definitely gave me the strength that I needed through it, and he gave me a calmness about it that I was really personally very surprised about. As I said, I felt comfortable, and he just really helped me through the whole thing. So my summer started with leadership training. They had a leadership seminar. It started June 13th, about 5 days before the kids started to arrive. There I took classes on leadership. We went over the basic rules of teen missions and the rules that we were expected to uphold as leaders. And they also taught us different ways to counsel kids, and different techniques you can use in counseling, going over verses together, and they just kind of gave us a basic idea of how to handle the kids that got there. And they would tell us stories about, like, this happened, just to give us examples of, like, if this were to happen, here's how you help. And so that was just kind of a basic 101 how to be a leader. My kids started to arrive that weekend on June 18th to register and start their own training. So within about 24 hours, going from leadership seminar to when the kids arrived, I went from, like, no stress at all, no worries in the world, just kind of, I was just relaxed and having a good time with the other leaders, learning as much as we could. And within that 24 hours, it went from no responsibility to all the responsibility. I personally registered our 14 kids. because the other leaders unfortunately weren't available to help out at that time. So I was able to collect all their personal finances, their passports, their health forms, shot records, just anything that, any paperwork that teen missions required. And so I got to do that, which was very exciting. It was a little scary at times, and it was like, okay, I gotta handle all this money, I gotta figure this out. But it worked out, thank goodness. And it was a little crazy at times. There were a couple moments where I almost panicked, but it was okay. God gave me peace, and He gave me people who were able to walk by and help me out with whatever I needed at the time. After that, we went into boot camp. Boot camp was kind of a blur for me. It was basically the other backup leader and I running our kids to different classes and making sure they made it on time, making sure they were doing okay as far as like health, because making sure they were staying hydrated and everything, and taking care of blisters, because I mean it's down in Florida, so that heat can really get to you. So we wanted to make sure that the kids were safe there. Um, I was the team nurse, sort of, kind of, um, which meant that I got to take care of most of the blisters and any issues that rose up health wise. I would also run the girls or boys down to the nurses station if they needed it. Um, and I also had the surprise of leading music class. Unfortunately, Teen Missions was short staffed this year, and so they weren't able to have people at every single class for music class specifically. So I got the chance to teach my kids music, and it really increased my respect for any teacher because leading 14 kids in a small choir class with, you have to teach them how to stand in presentation formation, um, which isn't too hard, you would think. And you have to teach them the music. We didn't have any musical instruments. Sometimes teams will have like a ukulele or a guitar or something that they can use to either keep time, um, stay stay on key, anything like that. Unfortunately, all we had were our voices, and we had one of the kids use a bucket to keep the beat for a couple of the songs, or to use his leg, just kind of slapping his leg to keep the tempo. And so it was interesting, but we were blessed with some very good voices, and I'm really proud of how well they did, honestly. I mean, it was a little crazy trying to teach them and trying to keep them all focused and trying to keep the energy up, because we had our music class right at the hottest part of the day and right after lunch. So all the kids and I were all just ready to take a nap at that point. And so it was really hard keeping the energy up, but I mean, we all got through it and I got that experience. So I really respect whoever can teach a class, because I mean, I only had 14 kids. I don't know what it would be like with 30 or more, honestly. It'd be crazy, but it worked out well, and God was able to use the different talents that they had with their voices and with keeping beat and stuff, that He used us for evangelism in that way. Um, so our team did have four leaders. We had Thomas and Julie Clyde, who were both staff members at Team Missions. They had both gone to school there at the BMW school, and they had actually been married just 3 months before. And they thought they were just going to go to Cambodia with one of the other teams. They ended up being sort of kind of drafted by Teen Missions in a way. They were asked to pray about it and to come along on Team Poland if they could, because otherwise it would have just been me and the other male leader. So thankfully, God put it on their hearts to come with us to Poland, and so they helped us lead. And the other leader was Bob Martin. He was actually my first leader on the very first team that I went on. So luckily, he and I had that connection. We were able to connect over that, and we just had that bond we'd already formed. And so that was a real blessing to me, to just kind of have a familiar face and that comfort. So God really blessed me that way. Thomas and Julie weren't able to be there almost all through boot camp because they had other duties to do as staff. They were caretaking around there, and they just had other stuff they needed to do. So while we were at boot camp, it was just me and Mr. Bob for the most part. which it actually worked out fine. It was a little, I thought it was going to be hard. I thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was. But basically, he and I would take the kids for a couple of their morning classes in the afternoon, the early afternoon classes, and he would take the kids for the evening classes. So I could go and do my own personal thing if I needed to just get away, to have time by myself. Um, so it actually worked out really, 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 really well. And God gave us the ability to have classes that I didn't have to be at, and then classes that Mr. Bob didn't have to be at, so we could just each switch off very easily. I also have my own classes that I attended in the mornings. Every now and then, I had cooking classes. Um, that really helped me to prepare, and it was mainly focused to help you prepare for serving large portions and preparing large portions, because a couple of the teams, they had like 30 people, so you need to be prepared to make large quantities of food, which is a little different than we do it at home, where you can just pop something in the microwave and it's done. They also taught you how to use like a gas stove and how to build a fire and stuff like that, for especially for the teams like going to Africa or going places where they didn't have the just the blessing of a stove or an oven, which thank goodness we did have an oven. We had two ovens and an 8 burner stove top, so that was really great for us. And we did have a microwave, but that was just a little extra. Um, I only managed to partially ruin one of my dishes, and it turned out okay. It wasn't. It was still edible at least. That was probably a low point for me during boot camp, but um, thank goodness my kids were very gracious about it, and one of them even claims to like it, and I'm still not quite sure I believe him, but that's okay. If he liked it, he liked it. I mean, it's cooking. What can you do? So it was kind of a humbling experience for me because I've never really cooked for that many people before. I've barely cooked in general besides microwave foods and stuff like that. So it was really kind of neat to get that knowledge too, and to kind of see what it's like just being on that end of the food. It was always really fun to watch them coming in either later on in Poland when they would come in for their food, or when my kids would come in during boot camp, and just to see them all like excited to eat your food and try it out. So that was a real blessing to me in that way. Um, and besides that one dish, they all turned out fairly well, which I was really thankful for. And so God definitely helped me along with that, because going from not much cooking experience to that, it was pretty cool. At the end of the 2 weeks of boot camp, we headed off to Poland. We traveled, it was about 13 hours by plane, I want to say, and ended up in the Czech Republic in Prague airport. And from there, we bussed out to our location in Poland, and that was probably about 4 to 6 hours by bus. Um, After we arrived, things settled down pretty quickly. Miss Julie and I set up the kitchen and got out all the supplies that Team Missions had sent us with, all the towels and the cooking supplies. We bring over our own food, in case there's not the option to go out and get food, like, so just so we kind of have staples, and so that way we don't have a huge, like, so we're not going out and buying a whole bunch of food and just kind of making the economy just kind of a little tipsy there. So we just unpacked, we cleaned up the kitchen, we kind of looked around, made sure everything was okay. We figured out who was going to go into what room. We gave the boys a room, we gave Tom and Julie a room, and then we gave the girls a room. So everybody just kind of settled in. There were still a lot of questions asked by the kids, which we couldn't always answer, and that was always hard to say, I don't know. But one of the things I learned was that it's okay to not know some things, and it's okay to let people know that you don't know. Because, I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. You can't do anything about that, and it's better to just be honest with them than to like be sitting there trying to come up with some answers when you just honestly don't know. So it was a little uncertain when we first got there. Like, they all wanted to know what we would be doing the next day, what we'd be doing the day after that, and we just had to just say, calm down, let's handle this, 1 hour at a time. Let's just get through this next hour. We did have to set up a rule for the kitchen. We did have to put a duct tape line across the door that the kids were not allowed to cross. And so that did kind of slow down the questions because they would have to ask if they could come in before coming in. So that kind of slowed them down a little bit and gave us a little bit of a break. Crossing the line would be what we call an SB. An SB is a special blessing that's handed out by the leaders only. And an SB is basically, it's like a form of correction or a form of punishment almost, but it's something that we hand out when there needs to be something corrected. And how we handled our SBs was we had the kids clean the bathrooms. So it's not something that you want to do. That kind of gives you an idea of what it was. Yeah, it's not something you wanted to get. So that way we had a form of correction if there was rule breaking, if there was anything wrong going on. So as female leader, like I mentioned before, or actually, so as a female leader, my missions field was in Poland, but I'd say my missions field was more taking care of my kids, and they were my main focus on the trip, like making sure they were fed, making sure they were healthy, um, making sure that we had food prepared if we were ever traveling for any reason, if we were going out for any reason on the weekends. We would, Miss Julie and I would work together in the kitchen for cooking and for answering questions in case they had anything, if they came to us with any problems. That so we would just kind of work together to answer those questions and to just help them as much as we could and to just counsel them if they needed it. So Miss Julie and I worked together quite a bit. We were probably with each other 90% of the time, and it was really great. I really enjoyed working with her because she could also help me if I was ever struggling with anything, or if I needed to pray with somebody, I could always just go to her, or just she was just always available for me in case I ever needed anything. Um, so I did want to let you all know kind of what my regular day was like. I spent most of my time in the kitchen, like I said. So I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what my day was like, and this will also, the reason I mentioned that I spent most of my time in the kitchen was because of the fact that if you pay attention, a lot of my time is making meals. Like each meal took probably about 2 hours to prepare, roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours. So you'll kind of just see how long it would take to do things. And so here's kind of the schedule. At about 5:30, we would wake up for breakfast. Miss Julie and I would go down and prepare breakfast while the kids went into the other room and had a Bible marking session. At about 7 o'clock, so an hour and a half later, we would announce two kids who would be helping us in the kitchen that day. We called them KP, or Kitchen Patrol. And then, yeah, we would have breakfast. At 7:30, we had private devotions for the team members and for the leaders if we were able to. Most of the time, Miss Julie and I were not able to actually have our devotions at this time. We had to have them later in the day in our own time because of the fact that either we had to clean up something in the kitchen, we had to finish working on something in the kitchen, just anything that came up, we would sometimes have to put off our own personal devotions until that was done because some things just needed to be finished. I think I probably had my personal devotions maybe about 10 times at the same time as the kids through the whole summer. About 8 o'clock, the kids would leave for their work project, and that's when Julie and I would sit down and we get together a list of whatever items we needed to get at the store that day. And we just kind of plan out meals if we hadn't already thought of what we were going to have for lunch and dinner. About 9 o'clock, we leave for the store to pick up those supplies and also get a fresh fruit for breakfast, which we like to have every day. We were definitely blessed to be in a country where we could do that, and the fruit was always very good, very juicy, really, really fresh. So that was really an enjoyable treat to have. At about 10:30, we would get back and get started on lunch, and then lunch would be ready by noon, as long as everything cooked fine, which didn't always happen, but for the most part, we were able to start at noon. About 12:45, the kids would all sit down and have a library reading time where they would read like missionary biographies and missions books. And during that time, we would have a leaders meeting inside. We'd just sit down and discuss if there were any things that had come up, any problems within the team, anything going on that everybody needed to know that maybe everybody didn't know. And that was kind of just a chance for us all to just sit down, pray together, to think together, and make sure we were all on the same page. At about 1:45 to 2-ish is when the kids would leave for their work project again, and our KP would stay back with us. Their job was to stay with us the whole day in the kitchen. And so they would normally finish up the dishes left over from lunch around that time, and then we would dismiss them to go and do their bath and laundry if they wanted to. A lot of times they would kind of wait around a half an hour, just kind of sit and chat with us, and that was a really good time to get to know the kids and just to get to really know them personally and figure out, even just like figure out their likes and dislikes and what they're interested in and like what do they want to do with their lives or just anything like that. So we just kind of sit and talk with them. And I always really enjoyed doing that because we never, I don't want to say we never got to see the kids as a huge group, but Julie and I were generally in the kitchen, so unless they would come to us, we don't normally get to talk to them, which they did come to us and they were all really open about that, and they really enjoyed coming in to see us and see what was going on in the kitchen. So that specifically was a good time to get to know the two kids we had on KP. Um, so after we had dismissed them, also sometimes we would put together a dessert or something that couldn't be cooked later on in case we needed the oven or if we needed it to cook very slowly. So that was just also a time to get a dessert prepared and ready in case we needed to. So it wasn't trying to figure it out during dinner. At about 4 o'clock, we would go back to cooking for dinner. At 6 o'clock, we would have dinner. And then 7 o'clock on every other weekday, Julie and I would take the girls and we'd go do what we called GG's or Grubby to Grace with them. And the male leaders would take the boys and do God's Gentleman with them. It was just kind of a Bible study that was specifically geared toward girls and then toward guys. So that was just a time for us to kind of sit down as girls to talk about things, to discuss God's Word, and to just kind of get to know each other better and to grow in God's Word together. Miss Julie and I used that time especially to target areas that we knew that the team or that the girls were struggling with. That was always really fun to work with her on like studying the Bible and pulling together verses that we could use to help them. And it was really fun to watch them just kind of listening to us and soaking in what the words that God put in our mouths to tell them and to kind of see the growth happening over the summer as they took in the information we were given, and then like as the weeks passed we could kind of see them starting to apply it and starting to learn from it. So that was always really fun, and I really enjoyed working with Miss Julie on that one. um, Towards the end of the trip, we cut down our study time, our separate study times, to about a half an hour, so we could try to teach the kids the drama, which we were never able to actually finish. But they do have that knowledge in case they ever want to come back to teen missions that they can perform that. And they did get quite a ways into the drama, and I was really impressed with how they did. We also used that time to practice our presentations, make sure we all still knew the songs, make sure we knew who was giving the sermon or who was giving their testimony, and to just kind of get together and practice that in case we went out to evangelize, which we did get to do a couple of times. We were able to do one time we went out and did some street evangelism. We were able to give our presentation in the town square and in a small park nearby. So that was just a good time for practicing that and just keeping that all together and fresh in our minds. At about 8 o'clock, we would all gather on the front steps of the church, and then each team member and leader had a night set aside for them to personally share either a personal testimony or they could share like a little message or like a Bible verse or something that had impacted them. Normally lasted 5 to 10 minutes, sometimes it get up to 20 minutes, depending on who it was. And that was a real bonding time for the team because they could each share something that was personal to them that God had been teaching them, or what God had done in their life so far. And so you really got to know the person by the message or the testimony that they shared. And I really enjoyed getting to know them better and to just kind of see how God had been working in their lives and how He was still working in their lives. Because as a leader, I could still see that growth happening. And like me and the others, we would get together and we would like talk about it sometimes. And so just to see the growth happening was really encouraging to me, and to see what had happened to them already. I really enjoyed that. At about 9 o'clock, we would have a team prayer time. Either one or two people would pray, or maybe we would all just kind of take turns praying. That was always good. And then we had lights out by 9:30. which tended to drag till 10 sometimes because we had very excited kids who like to stay up a little late, but they all did eventually get to sleep. And that was also a time that where like Julie and I could go down to the kitchen and just sit down, have a cup of tea, either talk about the day, cry about the day if we had to, pray together, just kind of have a little bit of downtime where we didn't have to worry about, like what was going on with the work project or what we needed to get out of the oven, what was happening next with cooking. Um, so that was just kind of a nice time to relax with her or Thomas or Mr. Bob if they came in, just kind of sit down and talk. Um, my bedtime normally fell around 10:30 or 11, at latest maybe 11:30, because that was also after the kids had gone to bed. That was a time when I could either write letters home or do my personal devotions, which I had to do almost every night, because that was like the one quiet time of the day when I could just really focus, sit down. Um, so that's just kind of what a regular day was like for us and for me. Um, things didn't always go on that schedule, obviously, but that was just kind of a general weekday schedule for us. And luckily, it was very flexible. And so, in case anything ever came up, we were able to work around that. Sometimes the kids would worry because they didn't know exactly what was next, or sometimes they would ask what's next, even though we've been doing the same thing for like 3 weeks in a row. But it worked out, and they learned to adapt to the situation of not knowing sometimes, and to just kind of trust us that we would take care of them. Um, so the kitchen was really, really blessed this summer, and I don't mean that lightly. Like that's it's an amazing feeling to feel blessed, and I know it's kind of something that it's kind of a word that we throw around a lot. That we don't always, I think we don't really take it as seriously as we should. Um, there's this verse in Ephesians, I believe it's Ephesians 3. The passage that I like is Ephesians 3:14 through, I believe it's 22. It's till the end of the chapter. And it talks about our God who supplies us with abundance, who supplies us abundantly more than we could ever imagine. And I really like I started reading that verse while I was on the trip, and a couple days actually before the trip had started was when I first found it, and I really kind of got an idea of what it means to be abundantly blessed. My first trip I went to Africa, so I saw poverty and I saw like what it's like to have completely nothing and to still be joyful. But then I went to Poland and I really saw what it's like to be completely and totally blessed beyond what you could imagine. Um, the people at the church there were so generous, and they were so kind and loving, and they just gave with all their hearts. And it's an amazing thing to see that, to see people who are so willing to give like that. It seemed almost like every time we turned around, they were either offering us, oh, you can come over to our house for dinner this Sunday, or here's more food for you. They would bring in, one day we got a box full of like tortillas, and there was probably about 5 packages of 8 tortillas at least, so we were able to have fajitas a couple of the nights. And one day they brought in this huge crate of cucumbers, which we weren't even able to finish before the end of the trip, and they brought in with it a huge crate of nectarines, so we had nectarines for breakfast, lunch, and sometimes for dinner. And it was just amazing how much they gave and how willingly they gave, and it really showed giving with a cheerful heart. That was really a blessing to me. One time we went to a marketplace and there was this older gentleman there, and Miss Julie and I had gone over to try some of these special tomatoes that our missionary had told us about that were only in season right then. So we went over and we tried the tomatoes, and the man who was running the little stand didn't speak any English, but our missionary was able to translate for us, and he looked at us and he goes, "I can tell by your eyes that you are believers." And I was like, "Okay, that's pretty cool." And then he asked us to pray for him, and I was like, "Oh wow, that is actually really, really cool." And then he asked us to pray for his family and his wife, and So, we said we would. And then he started to just give us food. He pulled out a bag of potatoes to give to us, and then he pulled out cucumbers and gave them to us, and he pulled out tomatoes and he gave them to us. And it's like, first of all, we're like, we leave in a couple of days, we can't handle all this food. I mean, we did find a way to use it, but he just kept giving and giving, and he's like, here, take this, take this, and bless you, God bless you. And it was really, really amazing to see how much love he had for total strangers who said they would pray for him, and to just see how generous he was. And that was a huge blessing to me. I almost started crying. It just touched my heart so much, and really, like, it just really, that was probably the point where I was like, wow, this is what it's like to be abundantly blessed. And I mean, God can bless us even more than that, more than we can imagine. But the fact that he used that gentleman at the stand to show me that was just a really, really awesome part of the trip. And I mean, God just really showed me what the true meaning of generosity is and what giving with all your heart looks like. And it was amazing. Another thing about the Polish people that really stuck out to me was how they pray and their prayer lives. Almost every night that we were there at the church that we were staying at, they would hold these prayer services, and they would all go upstairs to this room where we had to be quiet downstairs. They would go upstairs to this room, and they would all pray for an hour straight, all at the same time. We called it a bumblebee prayer. I'm not sure if that was a technical term or if it was just something we made up. But they would honestly all go upstairs, and all in Polish, they would all pray at the same time out loud. And so we could just sit downstairs. If you're just sitting downstairs, you could hear like the noise floating down. It was really kind of cool. And it just, to see them so devoted in their prayer lives and so dedicated to God was really, really cool. And they also don't pray sitting down. They don't ever sit when they pray. I mean, maybe if there was a mother and she was taking care of her child, she might sit. But it's almost as a rule, they do not sit and pray. They will either get down on their knees or they will stand. And that just shows their reverence and how much they want to honor that communication that we have with God. And that was really, really cool to watch. And it just really showed their respect and how much they valued that communication with God, and I really enjoyed that. They also kind of, there's that verse that says to pray without ceasing, and that was all I could think of on this one Sunday, because we went to one of their church services, and they would have a little bit of prayer, and then they would give a message, and then they would pray again, and then they would sing a song, and then they would pray again, and then they would sing another song. And it's like between every single thing was prayer, and it was that bumblebee prayer where they were all praying at the same time. So we got to participate in that also, and it was really cool to be surrounded by all these Polish voices, and then you could hear the American voices as well, obviously standing out. And that was just really cool to just be in that room, and to just feel God's presence in that room, and to just be blessed by being surrounded by so many prayer warriors. So that was really, really cool. No team is perfect, and this team was far from perfect because we're human. Um, we did have our difficulties, we did have our struggles. One thing for me that was different this year was because of the fact that I was a leader. I didn't really have time to think about what I was struggling with, or time to really dwell on feeling sorry for myself, or feeling like, getting too worried about myself, because I was so busy worrying about the kids. I was too busy wondering, like, what were they struggling with and how can I help them? Which was good. It really helped me to take my mind off of myself, which is, I mean, I think about myself way too much. I know that. And I know being put in that setting where I had to take care of other people, it really gave me a view of what it's like to look to others to see what they needed help with. I and the other leaders, we would pray for the kids, we would pray with the kids, we would think about every problem that was going on with them. Um, I mean, that's what we're supposed to do as leaders. That's our job. These kids were placed in our care by their parents, by God, and that's not something to be taken lightly at all. We had to make sure they weren't only physically cared for, but that they were spiritually and emotionally cared for. It meant we had to be there if they had any questions, when they needed someone to talk to, if they needed someone to cry with, if they needed someone to pray with. We had to be there for them. As a leader, that I agreed to dedicate those 2 months of my life to taking care of the kids. And on my own, I would have never, ever had the patience or the words to say to them, or I would have never been able to really help them. But God, just like He promised, He put the words in my mouth. And I mean, I didn't feel adequate at all. But I read this quote that says, God doesn't call the equipped, He equips His called. And that's so true because, as I said, on my own, I could have done nothing to help these kids. But He put the words in my mouth and He put the thoughts in my head that I needed to help them and to speak to them. And I mean, I think I dealt with a bigger variety of issues over the summer than I've probably ever dealt with here at home. I mean, I helped the kids with their problems. I had problems that I had to deal with myself amongst the team, or that I and the leaders had to address amongst the team. I mean, there were issues that I dealt with that I never would have even wanted to deal with. But God just He gave all of us leaders the wisdom to know what to do and to just be able to help the kids as best as we could with Him. And I mean, He really stretched me and helped me to grow this summer. And like, I never would have grown if I had stayed home. I never would have gotten that experience if I had stayed home. And so I honestly wouldn't have changed a single second. Even the hard times, I wouldn't have changed a single second of this summer. Even the times when I had to learn lessons and patience and holding my tongue, stuff like that, it was worth it. Every single second was worth it. I really, really love the trip. Anybody who's asked about it knows the second they ask, how was Poland? I'm just like, amazing. It was just fantastic. As I said, I grew so much and I felt so much more in my zone than I ever have before. I don't think I've ever felt so comfortable in a position than I did when I was leading the team. And um, it's it's a really great feeling to know that you're doing exactly what God wants you to do, and to know that He's got you under His wing and that He's taking care of you through everything. God really showed me how blessed we can be by others, and how much of a blessing we can be to others, and how much of an impact that I personally can make on someone if I'll just trust God to give me the words to help them. And I mean, He used me in so many amazing ways in helping the kids. I really love and miss my kids a lot. I love you guys if you're watching the video. And I mean, I feel really free from responsibility now that I'm home. I don't have to look over all those passports, and I don't have to make sure they all have their money on them. I don't have to make sure we make it to the bus in time. But in a way, I do feel sort of empty because, I mean, I feel like it kind of seems like a funny phrase to say, but I feel like I did pour myself into their lives this summer, and I really gave them as much as I could give them to help. And so, like, I feel free, but I feel a little empty and like, okay, what now? I got home and it's like I went from all that responsibility to like, okay, there's nothing going on. What do I do now? But God really just helped me grow so much, and I'm really thankful for how He showed me I can make an impact on others' lives. Even if I feel inadequate, He is beyond adequate. He is more than adequate for anything we'd ever need. And so He would just really show me how much I could do if I just love Him and trust Him and just let Him work through me instead of trying to do it by myself. And it was just amazing to watch how much He blesses us and how much He blesses everyone around us. So that was really fun. So tomorrow morning, I'm heading out for New Tribes Bible Institute in Jackson, Michigan. I'm going to be attending that school for 2 years, Lord willing, and it is kind of a scary thought because I've never been out there at all. I don't know who my roommates are. I don't really know anyone in my class. There's about, I think there are, I want to say about 70 kids signed up in my class, so it's a smaller college. So I will get to know everybody, hopefully. And it is a mission school. It's a Bible school, so I'm going to be learning a lot about God's Word, about God, and I'm really excited to use that knowledge because and as I said, I felt inadequate before, and I just really, not saying that this will make me adequate, but it will really help me if I need to help others. It's going to give me that knowledge that I need, and it's going to give me that basic training I need in case I do go into missions, which I kind of think I might end up going into missions because I do believe that's where God's calling me, at least for now. But even if I don't end up, somewhere in Africa or wherever, I'll still have that knowledge and I'll still have that ability to teach people around me and to be able to share God's Word adequately. And so that's something I'm really, really excited for. I do want to thank you all for just all the support you've given, both with those of you who have given financially and helped me to be able to go on these trips. You guys are amazing. I think probably the thing I'm most grateful for is your prayers because that's had a huge impact on my life, and God has really, He's listened. You guys have prayed for me and God has listened, and He's blessed me beyond anything that we could ever imagine. And I do appreciate your continued prayers because I still have a long road ahead of me, and it's going to be crazy going to college and trying to learn all that stuff and possibly going on trips in the future. So just please pray that God gives me the wisdom to know what to do next and to know exactly what He has for me. So I just thank you so much for watching. If you've watched all the way to the end, sorry it's so long. I did try to narrow it down, and I mean, if you want to hear any more, let me know, message me. I will be kind of busy, but I'll get back to you as soon as I can. It was a life-changing experience, and I'm so thankful to God for letting me go through it, and to you for helping me along the way. So thank you so much, and God bless you.